Good evening to those bored enough to watch. In the previous video I discussed Duck Life 2, the sequel to the first game that opted to innovate and add a lot of things to the first game. The game was genuinely a great experience despite adding in a few issues of its own, such as a few aspects that made the game seem somewhat convoluted in some ways, but overall the game was a solid experience that sought to improve and add to the first game. That game was one that sought to allow for new things to see its way made onto what would go on to be a lot of the subsequent games, such as the climbing statistic and the sword. However, Duck Life 2 isn't what I'm here to discuss in this video. The Duck Life games are a series of games that I found to be genuinely enjoyable throughout the duration of time I've been playing them for, and in this video I'm going to be discussing Duck Life 3 Evolution. This game seeks to add and perfect the formula built with the previous two games, making things feel more natural and incorporating gameplay mechanics and statistics with a somewhat linear story, of which feels the same as the previous game, prioritizing the gameplay over the story akin to that of the first game. What is there is interconnected with the gameplay mechanics, something of which we'll see in due course. Duck Life 3 is a game that released on May 16th, 2011, developed and published by WixGames. Just to make it clear, the version I'll be discussing in this video is that of the edition included in the Duck Life Retro Pack, consisting that of Duck Life Origin, Duck Life 2 World Champion, and Duck Life 3 Evolution, the third of which we'll be discussing in this video. So, with that said, let's discuss Duck Life 3 Evolution. Once again, we start off with an introduction, debuting the concept of genetically modified ducks, stating that ducks can now be bred to become specialized for a certain skill. With that, we can choose the duck we want, all of which are specialized in their own respective way. For example, having more of an advantage when it comes to a certain statistic. After choosing our duck, we're introduced to the leagues. In this game, as opposed to simply training your ducks and partaking in races to have that be the end of the game, this one seeks to lengthen and add playtime in a way that feels natural, incorporating the concept of different leagues that we train towards to then become the champion racer. It incorporates the detail of there being genetically modified ducks into the structure of the game, something of which I can certainly appreciate. Already, we can see that this game improves upon what was established in the previous game by making things feel more fleshed out, and we'll be seeing numerous other improvements in due course. We start off with the Amateur League, where we then make our way to the Advanced League, the Premier League, and then the final race. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The Amateur League is one that sees the gameplay mirror what was established in the previous two games, while also incorporating more improvements to things such as that of the training minigames as well as the progression of the statistics in this game. What do I mean by this? Well, allow me to explain. In the previous two games, we were able to level up our duck to the maximum level in every statistic and then dominate all of the races and move straight to the final race. This game fixes that by not only requiring you to complete all three leagues to then be able to participate in the final race, but it also caps the maximum level of each respective statistic to 50 in each league. For example, the maximum of which you can reach by partaking in the minigames in the Amateur League is 50. The subsequent league sees that cap being now at 100 and the final being at 150. This fleshes the system out more for people such as myself who prefer to get every statistic to the maximum before partaking in races, and for that reason I appreciate this game for improving this aspect of the game, and in a way fleshing out the world a lot more compared to the previous two games. With that, let's discuss the Amateur League, starting with the training minigames. The running minigame is akin to how it's been in the previous games, however this time it adds these bouncing balls that you need to dodge as well as the normal ones that roll towards you. This definitely adds some level of challenge to the game as you now have something else you need to dodge on top of what there already is to dodge. I had fun with this minigame, and it's probably the best iteration of it that we've seen out of these three games. After reaching the capped maximum level of 50 in this statistic, we move on to the next training minigame, swimming. Once again, there's another visual upgrade visible, things such as that of updated sprites and the sword. Other than that though, this minigame plays relatively the same. It was still enjoyable nonetheless, and mechanically speaking, I really didn't think anything had to be changed. So with that, we move on to flying. This minigame here is probably one that sees the most improvement out of the four. Unlike the two previous games where the minigame was dependent on your pre-existing level of your statistic, this game alters this so that your survival in this minigame is dependent on how often you touch these purple coins. If you fail to get them for prolonged periods of time, then you'll notice that you'll start to lose speed before ultimately falling. I like this improvement. I think it's as such drastically, and especially while playing through the training minigame, I had a lot more fun doing so than I did in the previous two games. With that, we move on to climbing. This minigame is also the same as it was previously, and if anything, I really didn't think that this minigame required for anything to be changed. So in the end, this is something I don't really mind. With that, we move on to the Amateur League races. The races in this game are split between the qualifiers and the finals, both of which are split into three individual races. The qualifier races are ones that you need to complete before ultimately moving on to the finals. After completing it though, your duck evolves into a lanky duck, and you move on to the advanced league, where we get new training minigames and our maximum level for each statistic is increased to that of 100. The advanced league is seemingly set in the cities, a place of which is very different to that of the previous league, which is a theme in this game that we'll be seeing later too. I appreciate that this game opts to create different settings that are distinct from one another, fleshing out the world and making it feel more alive, with this game specifically even taking that step further into having separate hub worlds to accomplish that immersion to a greater extent. With that, let's discuss the training minigames, beginning with that of running. This minigame isn't necessarily changed very much. It mostly plays the same as it does in the previous league, only now that you need to consider jumping over these steps and onto a higher ground, not only dodging obstacles both rolling and bouncing towards you, but also the steps and whether you'll be able to jump onto it without being hit by these obstacles. Akin to that of the previous, I had fun with this minigame. It didn't really change much, which is something I don't have a problem with. What's there is already great while adding in a minor challenge. I didn't think much needed to be changed. With that, let's move on to discussing the swimming minigame. Akin to the previous, this minigame also doesn't change very much. While many of the obstacles within it are kept the same, others are either changed or added to be more of a somewhat difficulty to avoid. For example, making them longer, which means you'd have to make more of a longer jump, or tighter gaps that require more precise timing to avoid failing the minigame because of it. Again, I had fun with this minigame. I definitely did enjoy the extra challenge it provided. With that, let's move on to flying. This minigame also doesn't change much from the previous league, though it does add more tighter gaps that you need to make more precise movements to make it through them. I don't really have much to say about this minigame that I haven't said already, so with that, let's move on to climbing. Akin to the previous three, not much has changed here, which, again, is something I don't really have much of a problem with considering I found the minigame to be fun as is. With that though, let's move on to the races. The races in this league were definitely much more easier than that of which some may find were in the previous league, this time based off cities and everyday typical things you may see in such, cars, houses and the sort. However, after you complete the races, we evolve into an athlete duck and we move on to the third and final league, the professional league in the Easter Island, this time going for a more jungle based setting. In this league we're finally able to level up to the maximum level of 150 and we get new training minigames on the sort. So with that, let's discuss the professional league's training minigames. Starting with running, the minigame in this league changes it in a way so that you're the one approaching the obstacles and need to jump over them accordingly, and instead of the obstacles approaching you more rapidly, you approach them more rapidly and need to utilize skills such as that of reaction time to avoid them more accordingly. I liked this iteration a lot, and it was one that I had a lot of fun with, especially when it got more fast paced. I liked having such a thing be put to the test, and I definitely liked this over simply having another obstacle to keep an eye out for. With that, we move on to the swimming minigame. This minigame has drastically changed from what we've seen in the previous leagues, this time needing to click and hold to maintain height in an overall position to avoid touching the walls, as if you do so, you lose the minigame. The somewhat floaty controls of this minigame, while they thematically make sense considering we're underwater, doesn't translate well into gameplay, as sometimes you will see times where you react quickly enough but your duck simply moves too slowly to be able to get out of the way in time. The controls definitely take some time to get used to, but once you do, it's a very fun minigame that is definitely miles more engaging than the previous swimming minigames in the previous leagues. With that, move on to the flying minigames. This minigame adds two obstacles indicated by their respective signs, one where you need to fit through a tight gap indicated by this arrow, and another where you need to move out of the way of the obstacle, indicated by this warning sign. I definitely liked the added challenge of not only having to keep your eye on collecting the purple coins, but also that of needing to avoid the obstacles. It definitely makes things more fun and interesting while also incorporating some level of challenge to the minigame. With that, let's move on to the climbing minigame. Akin to the previous two leagues, this minigame didn't really change much, which again is something I don't have a problem with. Even if very little to nothing changed at all, I had fun nonetheless. With that, let's discuss the races. The races in this league are based off the jungle, the mountains and the sword, once again maintaining that jungle theme to this location and league as a whole. This league expects you to be at level 150 or somewhere close to it, as some races clearly can't be won if you're not near that level in your statistics. Other than that though, I enjoyed watching these races occur. After completing the qualifiers in the finals of the professional league, an otherworldly portal appears, and we're to go through it to complete the rest of the game as a whole with the final race. As we travel through this portal, we feel ourselves evolving as we turn into the Supreme Duck. We're now in the lair of the champion racer. This game definitely improves upon the final bosses and makes them feel more climactic in a way that the previous two hadn't done before. In this game, we need to destroy these Domoquin by clicking on them to prevent them from attacking our duck. This is definitely a good stepping stone into making it feel more interesting and engaging, as we can now do something to actively contribute to the race and do something to help our duck during the race as opposed to just watching it. I liked this final boss. I found the music to be amazing and very fitting with this final boss, and it's definitely one of my favorite Ducklife 3 OST tracks. With that, let's discuss this game further, and the steps it takes towards innovation. As I mentioned earlier, this game improves upon and innovates the normal gameplay we've been seeing in the previous two games by allowing for things to not only flow more naturally, but also does so in a way that isn't very jarring. For example, in the second game you had to buy additions to your maximum levels in your statistics with coins, something of which, while did accomplish its goal in extending the game in a reasonable and natural way, isn't done as well as it is in this game. In this game, it now ties in with the central theme of the game, evolution. Speaking of, I like how a lot of the things revolve around such a thing in this game too. For example, the different leagues and how they improve upon and contribute to the structure of this game, but they also contribute to things making more sense and more natural. For example, in this game, the maximum level of which you generally tend to reach in a league is that of 50, of which said maximum increases by 50 per league, as something that makes a lot more sense than the progression in the second game, and it also helps in making the game feel more fleshed out. Now to discuss the extras. In this game, there's a lot of things that you can do post-game compared to the previous two. You can replay through the final boss by simply re-entering the portal, and after completing the final boss in general, you're awarded the throne room, as well as the arcade, which allows you to play through training minigames, as well as a new minigame called Domokun Shootout, one of which you need to hit as many as you can in a certain duration of time. It's a fun little minigame for those who want to indulge in such a thing. I tried, but as you can tell, I'm not necessarily very good at it. You're also awarded 500,000 coins, something of which you can build up if you continuously play through the final boss. Akin to that of the previous two games, you can also fill in whatever remaining statistic that needs to be maxed out. And finally, you can initiate a new duck entirely. While you're able to keep your old ducks in leagues, you'd have to unlock them again with the new duck. It's a good way of initiating some sort of new game plus, and it's something that I appreciate about this game in terms of giving the player more to do after initially beating the game. This game makes a multitude of different innovations and improvements to the first two Ducklife games, and it enhanced the experience in so many different ways, evident in the game feeling more fleshed out, its progression feeling more natural, and generally being more significantly fun to play than the previous two games. This game is considered by many to be the best in the franchise because it improves, adds, and perfects things from the previous games. One of the most significant improvements that come to mind is that of the final boss, and how we can actually do something to help our duck throughout the duration of its occurrence. That, among so many other things, make this game a genuinely amazing experience to play through, one that doesn't completely stray from the formula of the previous two games to the point where it's completely jarring to play, but to the point where it's able to solidify itself as a game that somewhat perfects the duck life experience. With that, let's conclude things then. As I mentioned earlier, this game is genuinely a great experience and in my opinion, worth your time. I think this game improves upon so much and opts to perfect the classic duck life formula, and for that reason I appreciate this game a lot. There's a reason that so many people consider this to be the best in the series, and playing it for myself I now understand that reason. I'm mainly someone who played Ducklife 4's mobile remake and always thought of that to be the first game given its name not having the subtitle of it being the fourth game, but playing these three games, and especially this one, has shown me what I've been missing for the longest time, and that is the amazing trilogy of games that came before. I'm glad I got to play this game, and I'm glad that it's being preserved well through the Ducklife Retro Pack. So with that, I leave you with this. If Ducklife is your kind of game, then I recommend that you start with the Retro Pack and move your way from there. And if you haven't played Ducklife 3 yet, then I highly recommend it. So, there's the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. This video has definitely been an interesting one to make. Ducklife 3 is such an amazing game, so I did enjoy my time making this video. I want to apologize that this video took some time to come out. It's been about 8 or 9 days since I last uploaded. Some things got in the way of my upload schedule and I didn't have time to devote myself to working on YouTube videos. You know the drill. I hope that I can be more consistent in the future, but nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to follow me, then my socials will be linked in the description, as well as any afterthoughts or messages I may want to add. With that, I haven't really got much else I want to say, so I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.